You're listening to Truth in the Afternoon. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Harris. 833-212-1017 is the number. See, I shouldn't have been up in here hanging out with that other guy. The Truth with Sherwin Hughes today. Had a good time. Hung out with Noni Juice, Sherwin V. Hughes. So, had a good time today. So, had a really interesting weekend. Ended up driving to Chicago on Sunday. Took me 3.5 hours to get there. And then coming back, it took me like 3 hours. Ridiculous, backed up traffic, crashes, accidents, all kind of crazy stuff going on between here and the south suburbs of Illinois. But I made it back. I made it in. Everybody's good. All is well with the world. I also made it a point to listen to what other people were saying throughout the day, throughout the week. And so, as you know, my weekends are spent really just hanging out and reading, right? I read a lot. I'm a nerd. I read a lot. Can a boomer be a nerd? Or am I a noomer? A nerd boomer or a boomer nerd? That would make me a bird. That's about as dumb as I could come up with. However, as I start to, first of all, I'm reading a book, and I hope, I'm not going to say the name of the book, but in October, I hope to have the author on the show to really discuss and talk about the Black community. Now, the reason I'm intrigued about this book is because it's written by a white female. I think she's like Gen X. And because of that and other things I was watching and other things I was reading, it made me start to think, there are some things that are in our community that we hold on to and that we think are important, and they're not. I mean, they sound important, and they've worked their way through our community, through our families, through our churches. But I don't really think it should have the weight that it does. If anything, I think that it's a cop-out. I think that we're blaming something, and it's not really true. Here's why. So, listening to what people say and do in their lives is not based, it's not a generational curse. We have to stop saying, oh, you do something so somebody else does something. That's a generational curse. If you drink and you're an alcoholic, and then your daddy drank and he was an alcoholic, and your grandfather drank and he was an alcoholic, and your brother and your cousin, your uncle and your sister, then it's a generational curse. And I say, I don't think so. I think we're victim of what we see is what will be. And if you see a lot of people drinking a lot, then you may drink a lot and be sociable and then end up becoming an alcoholic. I know there are medical things that go along with that, but bear with me, I'm going somewhere. It's not a generational curse and it's not trauma. I believe in many cases it's people. No, let me not say that. Let me just be authentic. It's people living off the lies of their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents, telling them things that are not true and not based in fact. It's folklore. We hold on to things. Investing in the market is playing the market. It's a risk. Of course, it's a risk. Yeah, but it's like gambling, so you shouldn't invest. And so you have a decent job, but then you don't invest, and then you end up broke. Why? There are things that our parents told us that are not true. There are things that happened to us in the past that we should have overcome and that we should be able to make amends for. Henrietta Lacks. You know who Henrietta Lacks is? The Puerto Rico experiment, Tuskegee experiment, minorities have been victim of medical doctors during research. While it's unfortunate, it doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the doctor, shouldn't get yourself checked, and shouldn't be a part of medical research. But I had to think about, based on my belief that many things are not a generational curse, that we just do and are basically told dumb stuff. And I say dumb stuff because I can think back things my grandmother told me that didn't come to fruition, didn't pan out, were just blatantly wrong. Number one, white people, believe it or not, are not the devil. Give them too much power. They got the money, they got the power, they got the this, they got the that. Well, all these middle-class Black people, upper middle-class Black people doing well. There seems to be this thing that we believe that by virtue of being white, you're better, and you're not. So looking at oneself in the negative, thinking that people are automatically better than you because of their race, is something that was taught to us by them and has carried through for decades. Number two, many of the things holding you back are based on things you heard, not things you experienced. How many things can flow through social media that are just blatantly wrong and we believe it? Or we saw something, a two-dimensional video that didn't cover all the angles, and we think what we saw was one thing, when in reality, it's another thing. But how did we get there? We got there because you decided to believe it. What would happen to Milwaukee if half the people who don't believe something about themselves that's positive started believing it? What would happen to Milwaukee if every other person in high school decided, I'm going to graduate this year? What would happen if you thought, my neighborhood is not bad and that I'm going to do something about it to make it good? Because in the end, my number three, the only thing you have to stop fighting is you. But then that circles us all the way back around to the church. And I guess the last thing you need to fix, which is something nobody will talk about and nobody will look at and nobody will pursue, the only thing you have to stop fighting is your self-defeating belief system.
And that is Dr. Ken's Truth on the new 1017 The Truth.
This is 1017 The Truth.